Hello people of Earth, hello people across the multiverse, I'm Prince Tumi and welcome to another episode of Writing Thoughts. Hidden worlds and people are such a big thing in stories, especially fantasy. It's a lot of fun imagining a secret society, especially a magical society, cleverly hidden away from the foolish mortals of the world with their Big Macs and their shopping malls and their endless internet politics over internet politics. Ugh, those filthy muggles are disgusting. There are many ways you can hide your magical or hidden society. The fairies of fantasy often live in other worlds, the wizards of Harry Potter hide in plain sight among the filthy mortals and have certain laws and enchantments to keep themselves hidden, and in the life and times of Juniper Lee, magical people live freely in the mortal world but are hidden by a magical veil that keeps the mortals from seeing, smelling or even hearing them. Though that begs the question, what happens if a giant stomps on the ground? Do they leave a giant footprint, or does the veil's magic somehow hide the footprints? If the latter, have humans ever fallen in a giant's invisible footprints and freaked out? What if magical people fight and bump into mortals? Does it not scare people? Maybe this is where ghost stories end up originating from magical people going in conflict against people, bumping into people, shaking things up, and then people think it's a ghost when it is in fact engaged in battle right around them. You never know. That's a good idea that you could maybe use in your own stories. The Percy Jackson books also have a magical veil called the Mist, which they use to also hide magical people. But unlike in Juniper Lee, the Mist doesn't turn things invisible. Instead, it creates a sort of illusion, shrouding magical things to look like something that mortal minds can comprehend. So, for example, a sword could look like a baseball bat, or it could even look like a gun. One of my favorite examples from this is when Percy Jackson's giant rhino-sized hellhound came out looking like a poodle in front of his entire class and his teachers. That was brilliant because I was trying to figure out whether or not the mist made the hellhound look like a giant poodle, or if it somehow even changed the size of the hellhound into a tiny little animal. I have no idea, but I just thought that was hilarious. Some magical locations are hidden in uncharted parts of the world. They're kept hidden by never-ending storms, or they're kept hidden by powerful enchantments that keep them invisible to mortal nuisances like satellites. Sometimes there'll even be some sort of enchantment around the magical location so that anytime a sailor or a pilot goes anywhere near the location, immediately their minds are changed to turn around and go a different direction. They're unaware that this is happening to them, and the magical community is kept hidden. Another method is used in the Artemis Fowl series, where the fairies live deep underground thanks to their technology being centuries ahead of anything humans can build. Some even live in the bottom of the ocean, and since more than 80% of our oceans are uncharted and unexplored by mankind, it makes a brilliant place for hidden communities to stay hidden. For example, the many stories that include Atlantis being hidden and still thriving at the bottom of the ocean, including all the different sorts of mer people populations and all the other sort of underwater people who also live underwater in many different types of fantasy stories, are known by anybody amongst mankind to ever be alive. When we hide the communities in our worlds and our stories, we need to ask ourselves as many questions as we can about them so that they not only become believable, but so we can also find new ways to create interesting story arcs from the answers to our questions. We need to ask ourselves, why does community felt the need to hide in the first place? You have to consider how authorities got everyone in this community to agree to go into hiding without a single rebellion attempt. Think about it. A whole community of magical people is turning their lives upside down by going into hiding just because some stupid mortals did something stupid to drive them away. Are you seriously telling me that everyone is cool with that? Nobody thinks it's unfair that they need to go into hiding instead of fighting back? You need to answer the question of why everybody is agreeing to this and what would happen if they disagreed. In Hellboy 2, the magical people made a pact with humans to live in the wilds, while humans kept to their cities. But the humans continued to grow their cities and wipe out nature, forcing more and more magical people to find new places to hide. I often wondered, why did the magical people not protest when the woods were being destroyed by humans? Why was it that only the antagonist of that movie was the one having a problem with this? Why was he the only one objecting? And how did the humans even forget the magical people were living in the woods? And why did the magical people hide instead of going, hello, we're still here, remember our pact? Back to the side of the world, thanks, dumb mortals. You have to ask these questions. If you don't, there are going to be a lot of plot holes, and you're going to find your reader would be sympathizing and empathizing more with your villain than your heroes, because it seems like the villain is actually trying to do something good, whereas the hero is trying to do something misguided that will end up ruining things for everybody else in the long run. Another question to ask yourself: did this pact also apply to humans of all nations? Did it apply to all magical communities around the world? People rarely ever think of this, and I believe that there's a lot of untapped potential in fantasy stories if you consider every single magical community hidden in every part of the world. Because seriously, each part of the world is different, each part of the world is unique, and they have their own way of doing things, and yet somehow every single one of them went into hiding. Every single one of them decided that hiding from humans was better than fighting back. How did the whole world of magical people agree to this, and why? This will allow you to bring fresh and exciting new perspectives to your stories, as well as new and interesting conflicts that very few fantasy writers ever think of considering. I mean, you have to seriously think about it. How do the humans keep forgetting that they lived with magical communities? And why has all this evidence of these things been reduced to myths and legends? Are there no ruins and ancient artifacts from the days humans and magical people interacted? I'm going to repeat this question again because I really need my fellow writers to consider this when you're writing your own hidden world stories. How does a whole planet of magical people in every single nation just unanimously decide to go into hiding? Are there even political differences in this? Mortal world leaders in the mortal realm can't even agree to the same thing for a day, and yet somehow all magical politicians in all countries across the earth can somehow unanimously agree to stay hidden, and they continue to agree with each other on this for thousands of years. Do none of them ever get tired of hiding? Has there never been an Australian or a Russian or even a Japanese world leader from 800 BC or from the 1800s who decided that hiding from mortals was stupid? Are all magical world leaders bound by some magic to keep them hidden so that they don't disagree with each other at all on this subject? Will something bad happen to them if they disagree? Why do all politicians in the magical world lack the type of corruption to take over the mortal world? Usually the only one who ever tries this or even considers it is the villain, but not all villains do. Sometimes villains are just content with taking over the magical world for some reason, but they never even consider that maybe they should go out of hiding and take over the mortal world. The villains will even go out of their way and go through all of the effort of staying hidden from the mortal world while trying to take over the magical one, and it makes no logical sense because that's just putting more work on themselves when it would be simply easier to come out of hiding, attack the magical world, attack the mortal world, put them in conflict against each other while they take over from behind the scenes. It just makes more sense from a villain point of view to make everybody else fight amongst each other while you thrive from the chaos. Maybe I'm just wrong about villains. Maybe taking over the mortal world and the magical world is just too big a dream for some, and they're content to just taking over one side instead of both. Who knows? But if your villain is like that, you need to think of a logical reason for why. You need to think of a reason that makes sense to the villain and not just to your plots. Marvel's Inhumans dealt with this issue, as the antagonist seemed to be the only person concerned that the hidden city on the moon couldn't hold a population forever. This is one of the reasons why he ended up being a huge threat by gaining so much support, because he was the only person asking the questions that the authorities were ignoring. If populations in hidden communities start rising, do the authorities in those communities start taking measures to reduce the population? Attack on Titan took this approach in its first season. In the series, giant humanoid creatures called Titans appeared one day and started eating people. What is left of humanity fled and gathered together, erecting 3 very tall walls to protect themselves from the Titans and keep them out. The walls kept the Titans out for a century before the gate on the outermost wall was destroyed and the Titans came rushing in, eating people. People fled to the refuge of the second wall to survive, but there wasn't enough food and land to accommodate all of them, since the perimeter of the outer wall came with the most land for homes and livestock. In order to save the population and their supplies, the military had a large majority of their refugees enlist on a fake mission to return to the territory of the outer wall and reclaim their land. Truth is, this was just a thinly veiled attempt at population control in order to ensure that mankind would survive instead of everyone starving and resorting to violence and chaos because of increasing poverty. They sent their refugees to their certain deaths so that humanity would live. But not all stories go this route. Some countries in the real world limit the amount of children you're allowed to have. It might be interesting to look at for your own story if your hidden world had similar rules and regulations to control the population. Another question to ask: how does your magical world maintain its stocks of food and medicine? What do they do if they're struck by a famine or plague? Do they counter it with magic? How do they survive? How do they go undiscovered? There are many more questions to ask, and many more potential plot points to discover with each answer. I suggest you start looking at stories with hidden communities, magical or not, and analyze the heck out of them. Ask these questions of these stories and see if you can identify any flaws in them, and then try to formulate your own ways to avoid repeating these similar mistakes. I thank you for listening to Writing Thoughts. I am sorry I took so long with this episode. So much was going on and I had a lot of technical difficulties, but I had a lot of fun making this. I plan on making many more Writing Thoughts videos, and I plan on cranking them out faster and faster. I appreciate any support you can give me on social media. I appreciate it if you would like or subscribe to the channel. If you enjoyed this video and if you'd like more like it, I would also appreciate any support you can give me on Patreon, though I don't expect it to come so soon with such a small channel. Anyway, I love you all, and I'll chat with you in the future. Have a nice day!